Hi everyone, and welcome to Ruth Reacts to Books. I'm your host, Ruxie Ruth McGouth. This is season 2, episode 45. And today I am reacting to Under the Banner of Heaven by Jon Krakauer. So I will read the back of the book. I'll tell you what I rated it, and I'll tell you what I liked and what I didn't like, the food that I have for you, the recipe I have, and what my nails are. And then I have a very special guest who I brought in for an interview that I thought was necessary with this book. So this is a very special episode of Ruth Reacts to Books, and so I hope you'll stick around and hear from my guest. So Under the Banner of Heaven, a story of violent faith. And on the front it says, on July 24th, 1984, a woman and her infant daughter were murdered by two brothers who believed they were ordered to kill by God. The roots of their crime lie deep in the history of an American religion practiced by millions. Jon Krakauer's literary reputation rests on insightful chronicles of lives conducted at the outer limits. In Under the Banner of Heaven, he shifts his focus from extremes of physical adventures to extremes of religious belief within our own borders. At the core of his book is an appalling double murder committed by a pair of Mormon fundamentalist brothers, Ron and Dan Lafferty, who insist they received a revelation from God commanding them to kill their blameless victims. Beginning with a meticulously researched account of this crime, Krakauer constructs a multi-layered, bone-chilling narrative of messianic delusion, savage violence, and unyielding faith. In the process, he uncovers a shadowy offshoot of America's fastest-growing religion, analyzes the abduction of 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart and her forced marriage to her polygamous kidnapper, and raises provocative questions about the nature of religious belief. Krakauer takes readers inside isolated communities in the American West, Canada, and Mexico, where some 40,000 Mormon fundamentalists believe that the mainstream Mormon church went unforgivably astray when it renounced polygamy, defying both civil authorities and the Mormon establishment in Salt Lake City. The leaders of these outlaw sects are zealots who answer only to God, marrying prodigiously with virtual impunity. The leader of the largest fundamentalist church took 75 plural wives, several of whom were wed to him when they were 14 or 15 and when he was in his 80s. Fundamentalist prophets exercise absolute control over the lives of their followers and preach that any day now the world will be swept clean in a hurricane of fire, sparing only their most obedient adherents. Weaving the story of the Lafferty brothers and their fanatical brethren with a clear-eyed look at the Mormonism's violent past, Krakauer examines the underbelly of the United States' most successful homegrown faith and finds a distinctly American brand of religious extremism. The result is vintage Krakauer, an utterly compelling work of nonfiction that illuminates an otherwise confounding realm of human behavior. There you go. So I gave this book 2.5 stars. I was quite conflicted. So that's squarely between liked and didn't like. So here's what I liked. I liked learning about things that I did not know. Things that the U.S. government conveniently left out of my history class. For example, so there are some spoilers this is a nonfiction book. You can get it out and look these things up yourself. Highly recommend some of the things that you can learn in this book. Maybe they're in some history books somewhere, but I don't know. Jon Krakauer found them out. I had never heard of these things. So this is an unusual Ruth Reacts because you're going to learn some things if you watch this one that you may not have known, but I don't think it will hurt you to watch this episode because there's many things that I'm not telling you that are in this book. So here's some things that were left out of history class that I learned from reading this. There was some major mass murder of the LDS people in American history, like literally shot in piles. Like some of them were just shot to death, including children. And this is not in Florida. This was in Illinois. By Americans. They were just shot because they didn't believe in, and these were not the fundamentalist Mormons. These were just the regular ones. These were the regular LDS people just shot because they didn't like their religion. This was like the original Joseph Smith Mormons. And they shot them and killed them in piles of bodies. So there goes that whole freedom of religion thing out the window that we founded this nation on. That kind of made me mad. Made me mad a lot. Not just kind of. That was like a slight, it wasn't a joke, but what's it? Like ironic. I was being ironic with my kinda. That made me mad. And the government didn't really do anything about it. And then they even arrested the founder of the religion and then allowed him to be killed too. So not cool. So then the LDS people also fought back and did their own mass murder in something called the Mountain Meadows Massacre. Also not good, guys. Yikes. Eye for an eye. Apparently that was bad. So there's also that one that talks about in here, which you can also look that up. So I appreciated the history also of how the LDS Church was founded. I had heard bits and pieces of it. Like I knew about the golden plates, but I didn't know all about them. Like I knew a little bit about them, but I didn't know exactly what it is that had happened. According to Joseph Smith. And hearing it actually made a lot of things make a little bit more sense. So like growing up, one of my favorite authors was Orson Scott Card, who is a member of the LDS Church, or at least was. I assume he probably still is. And so I actually did not know that he was Mormon until my freshman English class in college when I was reading one of his books, and my English professor in college was also a member of the LDS Church and saw the book I was reading and said, oh, me and him, we have the same faith, and it's that we are part of the LDS Church. And I didn't know that, which, yes, you can say, Ruxie, Ruth McGouth, how dumb are you? And I'll be like, yeah, like I should have probably picked up on that, but I didn't. I don't know. I thought I was reading about kids in space. But yes, looking back, there were signs that he might be part of. I didn't read the one, Rebecca and Sarah, but yes, there's lots of signs throughout his books that he is part of the LDS Church. And looking back, it makes sense. And it even makes a lot more sense when I hear about this, because like the Alvin Maker series definitely mirrors a lot of similar things to Joseph Smith. So that made sense. But let's talk about what I didn't like, because there's a lot that I didn't like about this book. So as I said, on the front of this book, it says, under the banner of heaven, a story of violent faith. So first of all, that right there, I feel like is misleading. Now, I do feel like he's trying to say that the fundamentalist Mormon part is the violent part. And yes, I do think that has led to some poor things. Like I have read a book about Elizabeth Smart, and I have read another account. I can't remember who I've read one other book about someone who got out of fundamentalist Mormonism and got away from it. And so I do believe those people's accounts that the fundamentalist LDS can be very bad and can lead to some very dangerous things. But I think that being right there is kind of misleading and makes it sound like the LDS Church itself is violent and a violent faith. And I think like when people perpetuate violent things, it's not necessarily the faith that's making them violent. And so I didn't like that. Obviously, one of the main parts of this book is talking about, on the front of this book, it talks about the fact that Dan and Ron Lafferty murdered their sister-in-law and niece. So they were fundamentalist Mormons, and there are many, things. And so that's a main part of this book where it's talking about their story and it's telling you about the things that they did. And so that's a big part of this book that's talking about that. So I don't think that's fine. That like if that was just about their story, but it's also about other things. And so I just thought one of the things that he failed to do, and as a journalist, which I think he kind of is, he kind of takes that stock when I don't know if he's a journalist or not, but he sort of takes that track when he writes nonfiction books. I would have liked for him to state a little more clearly that the the mainstream LDS church like is not the violent faith people. He mentions it like a little tiny bit. Like he mentions at the end, I grew up next to some Mormons they were down the street from me in Oregon. Like, okay. And were they normal people? Because the ones that I know are like amazing, normal, nice, wonderful people. And they're definitely not going out and murdering people or having plural wives and stuff like that. And so I felt like that was something that just kept irking me throughout the entire book, was I just was very bothered by that. I am part of a faith called Unitarian Universalism. And in my religion that I grew up in, which is that, we believe in everyone being able to believe what they want to believe as long as it's not hurting at other people. And, you know, so I guess that's what I believe in. And I think that it really bothered me that I felt like he kind of made it seem like all people who are LDS, even though he was really talking about fundamentalist Mormons in this book, he didn't do a good enough job, in my opinion, of separating between just regular Mormons and the Mormons who are part of this fundamentalist sect. And most people in the country are part of just the normal LDS church. So my guest who I have a friend. She is a very good friend of mine. We grew up, she was close friends with my younger sister. And when I was in my first years of college and my sister was still in high school with Emily, her and me and my little sister and Emily used to hang out a lot, and we would spend a lot of time together. And so we were very close when we were younger. And so I know that Emily had joined the LDS church when she was a younger person. And so I asked her if she would be willing to sit down and talk to me a little bit about it, because I really trust her judgment. She's a very loving, wonderful person. And so I knew that I would want to hear from her, you know, after reading this book, like, well, why would you ever join something like this? And so I have, that's what I have for you as kind of an extra. So real quick, the recipe I have is bread. I know the LDS church likes to bake their own bread, and so I have that a homemade bread recipe for us to try to make. And then my nails under the banner of heaven. It's called French Riviera, but it's got like half blue and half kind of silvery. I thought that kind of mirrored sort of this like sky that we've got on the cover here, and just kind of gave that heavenly sort of feel to it. That's what I got for my nails. But I would like to introduce my guest, Emily. We recorded this before I did this. And so Emily wanted me to share one thing that she forgot to talk about when we did our interview. She wanted me to share with you all that polygamy has not been practiced in over 120 years in the regular LDS church. She said, in the current LDS church, polygamy is unequivocally disavowed, and its practice will get you excommunicated, as will any kind of abuse. And so I told her that I would share that with all of you, because in our interview, we forget to talk about polygamy completely, which is a big part of this book. They talk a lot about polygamy in this book. But Emily and I did not remember to talk about that when we had our interview. So I hope you'll stick around, see my amazing friend Emily, and hear a little bit about her experience and how she became part of the Mormon church, because I really trust her judgment. And I just wanted to hear one person's experience of why they would choose to go into something like that from not being a part of the Mormon or LDS church. As you'll hear, they like to be called the LDS church and not the Mormon church. So thank you all for joining me, and I will now introduce Emily. Welcome to a very special extra episode of Ruth Reacts to Books. This is me, your host, Ruxie Ruth McGouth, and I have a very special guest, Emily, with me. Emily and I have been friends for many, many years, and I asked Emily to join me for this kind of bonus episode after reading the book by John Krakauer. I think I just saw how to pronounce his name, and I might have just pronounced it wrong. Reading Under the Banner of Heaven. After reading that book, now everyone has probably already listened to the Ruth Reacts to Books, where you saw that I didn't really love the book very much. And I felt like the book really focused on three things. It focused on the killings that were perpetrated by Ron and Dan Lafferty in the 1980s of their sister-in-law and their baby niece. It focused on the fundamental Mormon culture characterized by polygamy and the patriarchal control of families and people. And it gave a brief history of Mormonism, starting with Joseph Smith and going through his death and into several of the leaders after him, and talking about kind of the connections to polygamy that they felt he and his early followers had. I felt like it largely failed to talk about the non-fundamentalist portion of Mormons. And John did mention in the book that he grew up with some Mormons when he was younger, just down the street from them. But then, like, that's it. That's all he ever said about it. It's like, well, I think he meant like not the fundamentalist type of Mormons. And so as I was reading this, I just wanted to kind of bring, like, as a journalist, I felt a little bit like John sort of left out kind of like a large portion of the rest of the story. And I just
Hmm.
wanted for my viewers, like, to hear something else as well, about the story. And so I thought of right away about you, Emily, and like we've been friends for a very long time since, you were in high school and I was just out of high school. And I knew that, you had become Mormon later in life or earlier in life, however you might look at it, when you were not a child. Maybe you were kind of a
Yeah.
child, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so
I was about 18 years
18,
old.
yeah, like right
Yeah.
on the cusp then of that adulthood. I thought you had kind of a unique perspective to share kind of about the religion. And so I thought I might get together with you and sort of hear a little bit from you about your perspective. So my first question for you just is about, could you tell us like how you first learned about the Mormon religion and what was it that like, tell us a little bit about your journey, like what drew you to it?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk to you and people who are watching your content. It's nice for me to share like a more authentic side of what we believe. There's a lot of misinformation about the Mormon Church, and so I do just want to share with people like, hey, we're not as weird as you might think, you know. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and I want to try and rewrite that a little bit. So what drew me? So I actually was raised as a young child in a Lutheran home, and I grew up in kind of a a abusive and neglectful home as a child. And I went to a Lutheran church, and this is nothing against Lutherans by any means, but I they were very hypocritical. They knew that our family was struggling with poverty and with neglect, but there was a lot of hypocrisy surrounding it, and there was a lot of blame and shame surrounding that. And rather than help, they kind of contributed to this really negative experience of growing up. And so, while I've always believed in, a higher power, as I aged, the more I saw hypocrisy in organized religion, and the more I was very disillusioned by that. And so, um, when I was about 14, we stopped attending church, and I went for about 4 years of my high school, career, not really believing in God or a higher power. In fact, I kind of went the complete opposite direction, where I was like, people who believe in these things are ignorant, right? Like you 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 come from nothing. It's biological, and then nothing in it, after you die, nothing happens. But I had some experiences that changed my mind. So I my one of my very good friends, her name is Nicole. She was Mormon. Sometimes we call ourselves LDS, which is um, from the name of the church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mormon is actually kind of a derogatory term that people use, but we use it because it is the name by which, common colloquialism has kind of adopted that moniker. So I use that interchangeably, the church or Mormon church or LDS church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So my friend, my very good friend Nicole, from when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, she was Mormon. And um and then I had another really great friend that I'd met online, kind of randomly. And it was at the beginning of the internet, right? But we got to know each other through AOL chat, and this was a person that I felt a very close connection with, who was also Mormon. And then I started seeing a boy in my high school that was also Mormon. And so my three like very close knit friends in Iowa, where there's not a giant Mormon population, were Mormon. And I was just like, this is weird. Am I supp supposed to be learning something? Am I supposed to um, and it coincided with a lot of mental health struggles in my life where I had some suicidal ideation at that time. And I decided to pray about it, like first time in a long time, decided to really pray about like, hey, what's right? What should I explore? I went to a lot of other churches in the area where I was, and I felt that same like this isn't right. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. I would leave with more questions than I had answers. And so I went a couple of years of just trying different things, including the LDS church with my friends. And it was the only place where I felt like that same feeling that I had felt like when I was a young child, and I just was pure belief. Like I just believed in God. I believed God knew me and loved me. And I felt that there. I felt that in that environment and that atmosphere. So um, I continued on this path. I said a prayer. I remember very clearly. I was riding in the car with my friend Nicole, and she had asked me sincerely. She was like, "So, what do you think of this?" I had really looked at her family as like a model family. They were very kind. They had two parents who loved each other and loved their kids, and it was just something I had never good parents that I had never seen modeled in my own life. And then I would, go to this other individual who was also LDS, and it was the same thing, like good parents, good home. They loved their kids. They did all the right, they seemed to be very in love. And so I decided to pray about it. And I remember praying for like the first time in a long, long time. And I remember just saying something like, give me a sign. Give me a sign that this is what you want me to do. Give me, I want this to be a big sign. No misinterpreting what this sign means. I really want you to tell me, God, that I am on the right path for me in my life. And is this real? And I opened my eyes and we got in a car accident. So we were driving in the car when I said this prayer, and we got in a car accident. Fender bender, minor fender bender, but I literally opened my eyes to a car crashing, T-boning us on my side. And so I was like, I got the message, like I will check it out. And so I, the thing that really drew me to the church was they're Mormons. If you ever meet an LDS person or a Mormon, they are some of the nicest, most generous, kindest, forgiving, friendliest people, very unjudgmental, like on a whole. And I wanted to be part of that, right? I want to live my life like that. They are not hypocrites. That's the other thing about LDS people. They do what they say they believe. They don't drink they say we don't drink coffee, they don't drink coffee. They say we don't drink alcohol, they don't drink alcohol. They say we believe in families, they believe in the importance of families. That is a key tenet of the faith. And for a person who didn't have the greatest upbringing, that stable belief in the importance of families and children and spouses was like a revelation to me. And I wanted to be part of that. And then, I had this feeling, right? This overwhelming feeling that this is where I was supposed to be, and I could not deny that that felt very divine, right? And so I joined the church, and while I didn't really understand everything, I really believed that I was on the right path for me and doing what God wanted me to do.
And you were 18 at this time, or a little bit
Yeah.
younger than that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I was 18, almost 19 years
Okay.
old. Yep.
So in the book, they talked a little bit about some racism. At, to be honest, this goes back a long ways. I mean, they are talking about historical issues, and like, let's all be real. Like, we've got racist issues in our country that we all know go back a ways and are currently present with us right now.
Yeah.
So, do you feel that in the current church? Like, is that something that's prevalent?
That is such a great question. And I think that we can all agree that modern monotheistic religions tend to lean a little conservative. And so there maybe there's that feeling occasionally, but it has more to do with the members of the church and their personal beliefs than the doctrine of the church. And in fact, the doctrine of our church is pretty darn clear that everyone is equal in the eyes of God. Everyone. And that is, of course, a personal belief that I hold as well, right? Like, I certainly don't feel like my personal congregation is racist by any means, but there are some underpinnings in church history that there were some racist undertones, but again, the church has evolved and we continue to evolve, and it's the same as there's extremists in every religion, and of course that holds true for Mormons as well. And but no, in our prophet, we believe in a prophet, right? That God still speaks to people, just like he did in days of old. We believe in a modern day prophet who has come out and said unequivocally, racism is not to be tolerated and that everyone is equal in the eyes of our Heavenly Father. So, um, personally, I think the church is incredibly progressive in some of these regards, and that's one of them. It's like we're not mincing words here. If you're doing something that would be considered racist, you need to stop doing that immediately. That does not align with our belief system.
Okay, cool. So, speaking of being progressive, how has the church progressed at all when it comes to like gay rights? I know, like, I'm a fan of like David Archuleta, who is a out gay person who at least at one point was part of the Mormon church. I don't know if he still is or not. He's talked a little bit about his journey, like being on his mission and like coming out to like the mission leader and some support that he did get from some folks in the church. But what do you know about kind of how the church either does or does not support people that are gay in the
Mhm.
LDS world?
So this is a really hard hitting question, right? And I
Yes,
want to be
yeah.
super transparent that I don't speak for the LDS church, right? I'm just a person, and this is my experience, right? I'm just a regular old person, and love David Archuleta and love gay people, right? I think sexuality is a spectrum, and if we're completely honest, I don't fall completely on the heterosexual side of that spectrum myself, and neither do a lot of members of the church, right? That being said, there are um, there is a belief in our church that marriage should be between a man and a woman. And that is hard for me, right? I have a gay brother. My aunts have been married for 40 years to each other, two women that have been my aunts for 40 years. You know, like I love gay people. I consider myself an ally. But my church believes that marriage should be between a man and a woman. And while we don't actively, well, I don't actively like dissuade people from getting married to or living the lifestyle that is authentic and accurate to them, it is hard to exist in a church like a lot of monotheistic religions where they believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. This is a really difficult subject for me
Yeah.
personally, right? All I can tell you is I have prayed about this and I've asked to know, and I have gotten a very firm answer, which is, Emily, you don't, it's not for you to know. You don't have to know. You don't have to judge people. All you have to do is love people. That's the only thing I've been commanded to do is literally love people. And so that's what I'm going to do. I hope that's David Archuleta's experience. I hope that he's doing something that is healthy for him. And when people leave, because being a member of the church is hard when you're gay, it happens. People can coexist in the LDS church and be gay. But it is harder. It's a harder experience to live, right? Because there is still this stigma that you are wrong or that you're sinning or um, that you're incompatible with the church. And so that's really difficult. Um, and so, but I do hope that our LDS population who is on that spectrum of sexuality understands that they're loved, that God still loves them, that we still love them. But I understand why they feel like it's not healthy to exist in this religious vacuum, just like any other
Right.
religious organization that might not accept gay people to the same degree.
Yes. Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. So, Emily, when I think of like strong boss women, like I think about you. And
Thank
so
you.
like you are raising like four little strong boss women, I'm guessing. I don't know your kids personally.
Yep,
So,
that's
in the book,
accurate.
it definitely talked about the Mormon religion and definitely like the previous people who were leading the Mormon religion were all men. I don't know if
hmm
that's still the case, but it kind of definitely made it sound very patriarchal. Can you talk about like raising strong women in a religion that maybe is patriarchal, or whether it seems that way, or like what has it been like to raise women
Sure.
in this way, and talk about that a
hmm
little bit?
Well, I would consider myself a feminist, right? In every sense of the word. I was raised by a feminist, right? And my mom had her real concerns when I told her I was joining the church because there's so much misconceptions about the church and equality and feminism and patriarchy. And I remember like coming home and telling my mom that I was joining the church, and she was like, I'm just worried you're going to be oppressed. And I was like, Mom, have I ever been submissive to a man in my life? Never, never. Right? I'm not oppressed. In fact, the church is incredibly progressive in its version of equality. Like women and men are equal, period. That is a tenet of our faith. Men and women are equal. Um, and so it's the same philosophy that I'm raising my four girls in, which is like you are worthy of love simply by existing, right? And that you are equal to any, anyone, right? And I, it's a there are still people who have incorrect takes in every religion, right? And I'm always a little bit worried about what somebody's going to say to my kid, but I have fireproofed my kids. They know that they are boss babes, right? Um, Another thing that I do is like modesty is incredibly important to a lot of people in religious society. And the thing that I've taught my girls is that we love everyone, number one. And number two is like you stand up for the people and be the voice for the people who can't have that voice for themselves or who need to be defended. And then modesty is situational. So like where some people are like, oh, your shoulders, don't want to cause a man to stumble. Like that's talk that's never existed in my home, right? Like modesty is between you and God. Um, and modesty is situational. Like if I wear a bikini at the beach, I'm wearing the clothes that would be appropriate for the activity that I'm doing, right? But if I wear a bikini to church, that would be inappropriate. So I I'm very careful about allowing my kids to decide for themselves what they wear and what they do and how they want to participate in this religion, because while it makes me feel good and while it feels real and authentic to me in this life that I'm living, I am not tied closely to the fact that this will also work for my kids. This is also a decision that I want them to make. Like religion is so personal, and how you want to have a relationship with God, incredibly personal. And so while I hope that they want to participate in this religion because it's meaningful to me and their dad, it's they have to come to that decision on their own. So I've given them a very wide berth on what how they want to participate in organized religion.
I love that. Very cool. Um, well, is there anything that you wish more people knew about the Mormon faith? And this is your last question, so
Okay,
throw it all out there.
there's so much I wish people knew. Wish people knew that Mormon is kind of derogatory. Not a big deal, right? Because it's just how people know us. And so I've kind of embraced that. But, you know, we believe the original and the name that we would prefer to be known by is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We want Jesus Christ to be the center of our religion, not a figure in a set of scriptures that we use, right? And so because we're known as Mormons, people sometimes don't think they there's like an obscurity, right? There's a some people don't think we're Christians, even though we are very firmly in the Christian category. Like it's in the name of our church. The other thing I want people to know is people think that the Book of Mormon is our only scriptures. No, absolutely not. We believe in the Bible as long as it's translated correctly, right? And the Book of Mormon is a supplemental to the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament. Um, if if you wonder about it, read the book. Like it's really very similar to the Old Testament and New Testament. So you want to know more about what we believe? Contact your contact your friendly neighborhood Mormon, right? Like there's a lot of us. It's like 17 million people at this point. It's the fastest growing religion in the world. It's not that weird. Sometimes people have this assumption that uh, women are less than men in our church, and that could not be farther from the truth. Like I can get up and speak in church. I can lead a meeting. We also have the world's largest women's and longest standing women's organization in the world since the beginning of time. It's called the Relief Society, and our whole goal is philanthropic. Our whole goal is to help other people be healthy. So if that's buying diapers, if that's um, raising money for socks, if that's sending packages to veterans, if that's there's just, I mean, it's endless. Probably every week or every other week, we're doing something real to strengthen homes, families, communities, and help people who are disadvantaged. So women lead in our church. Women are honored in our church. I think families are incredibly important. That's the other thing is like if you really want to know what what's weird about the Mormon church, I'll tell you. And then you can know, the weird, scary things about our church, which is we don't drink alcohol. We tend to not get tattoos. We don't do drugs. Ideally, we would save sex for within the bounds of marriage. Um, and, we believe in modern day prophets. We also believe that our families can be together forever. So when we're married here on earth, we keep that bond in heaven. So when I was a Lutheran, I remember very clearly the pastor saying the earth is only 2,000 years old. And when you die, that's it. You don't, you return to heaven. You're like a child. You don't remember your family here on earth. And I was like, then what, you don't remember your life here on earth and you don't remember your family here on earth. And what was it for? We believe that we had to come here and have these experiences to come into families and learn joy and misery and suffering and be witness to other people's joy and misery and suffering, to have children, to create, to make music, to write books. Like we have to be here to experience life, and that when we finish this life, that we use that for our good in our eternal existence, and that our families here on earth are still intact in heaven. So for me, while we're really encouraged as a faith to question everything, pray about it, make sure that you believe it. And I think that's kind of rare. Like in a lot of other religions, they're like, just believe it because you're supposed to believe it. And we're not encouraged to do that. In fact, we're encouraged to do the opposite. Question everything and see if it still holds true to you. And it does for me. So I think those are the major high points that I want people to know about us. And then, of course, if you have any questions, we have full-time missionaries. If you're really curious about what we believe, you can go to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.org. There's FAQ pages because there's always a lot of questions about what LDS people believe. And then we have full-time missionaries who would be happy to answer your questions. It's very low stakes to have these individuals answer those questions for you, just so you know, so you can know a little more. I'm not a person who's out here to convert anyone, right? I think everyone has to find their own path to God, but this is what feels authentic to me, and this community has given me a safety net of people who really love and respect me, has given me people to, like, a village to raise my children in, and has been all around like a really positive experience in my life.
Well, thank you, Emily, so much. I really appreciate you taking your time to talk with me and to share this information with everyone. I don't know how many people really watch me. I know my husband watches, so thanks
Hey,
for watching. Hey, I got one viewer, so I'll
yeah.
definitely send this to my book club who read the book with me, and just really appreciate you so much, and I love you, and thank you so much. And I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay, sounds good.
And so bye to all my viewers. I'll see you next week, everybody.